Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 248 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to talk about uranium for a little bit and do some other little factory fixes before we can test the new bus. Enjoy. Okay, I think I've got all of these numbers set. It's not super important if some of them ended up being wrong, as long as it's kind of ballpark, because this system is going to be producing lots of random ores, so as long as it keeps it from getting too low and getting too high, then it accomplishes its goal. And part of that is kind of spreading the load around, and I noticed it hasn't been too big of a deal, but since the tier 2 bus was put into place, I have noticed us building up a few resources. It's not all the time, but I've noticed us kind of being perpetually high on nickel and also tin. So I changed some of the priorities to focus less on things like nickel and tin and more on things like just copper and iron. It wasn't much of a change, but it might shift the balance a little bit to hopefully get those warehouses down a little bit, because all of this is basically just averages, so we're just trying to make the averages good. Another big change to this setup is I have included logic to make manganese. We've been making it before, but it was considered basically a byproduct, so we ended up using it all whenever it was available. So as a result, I felt like we should add manganese to our bus here. And knowing that, I kind of want to cut this off for now because we have some logic based on the consumption of manganese, and it's not going to be correct, because before it was a logic based on it being a byproduct. But if it is something we're actually holding on to now, we're going to want to change those numbers, but those numbers are downstream from here. So for now, we can just use this warehouse, but that meant that it got its own logic instead of being considered a byproduct. And in losing a byproduct, we have gained one. And it takes forever to fly across here now. I mean, look at this thing. That's a lot of ore sorting machines. But the byproduct that we have gained is uranium. And we might as well take this as an opportunity to do a little bit of research. Just for some numbers, we have a lot of new things we have to research for the next tier of various ores. And part of that is uranium. But just to get an idea of the numbers here, because uranium is going to be a byproduct, like everything else, we're only going to be able to make it in about 7 or 8 units a second at most, and that's not very much for power. So to make any use of it, it goes through the centrifuge, nothing different there. And it's a white circuit item, so it's not that particularly difficult to make. And we toss the uranium in, most of it becomes depleted uranium-238. And we'll get our 235s occasionally, and very rarely we'll get a 234. But that's the first step to making any use out of it. And then nuclear power, the good stuff. The reactor requires those heat pipe 2s, which we're now making in white circuits. Puts out 54 megawatts. We'll have to go through that setup later. But it's probably not going to be the biggest setup, because as you'll see with this math, is we're not really going to be producing that much power with uranium right now. Not until we can make it directly. So as useful as nuclear power is, it's not going to be like the end-all of the factory and suddenly we don't care about power anymore. So the fuel cell is 29 depleted uraniums, the 238s with 235, and that makes a fuel cell which has 2 gigajoules in it. And it also creates another option of the uranium-234s, which are kind of a weird byproduct that we have. But we can also mix those in with a whole truckload of 238 to make a 234 cell. And interestingly, the 234 cell is a 1.5 gigajoules as opposed to 2 gigajoules. And that's something that we can do to get rid of those various byproducts. And uranium is a byproduct. And one more thing we can do with it is we're going to have used up fuel cells and everything said and done. And when we are done with them, we could basically grind them up. It goes in a centrifuge, but we're basically grinding them up to get a little bit of 238 and some slag out of it. So that way we just don't have junk, that it gets reprocessed into stuff that we can use. And as far as right now, that's as far as we can take it. We need purple science to go to plutonium. There is one other thing we can do with this uranium. It's going to take quite a bit of research, as you see, A lot of it is stuff we can eventually do, but it's basically purple science that we need to get through, and tungsten, so it's kind of long term. But one other thing we can do with that uranium, and this is kind of the big dump of it, is we mix uranium-238 with copper to get uranium bullets, and then we can eventually make uranium magazines out of that. And the magazine size is the same as what we have now, it's 25, but it will do 24 base damage compared to our current ammo, which does 16. So it's a huge improvement to DPS when it comes to shooting things. And that's definitely something that we would want to do. But since that's far enough away, we probably want to plan on just getting rid of the ores that we have. And this is researching. We'll just let it go through since we talked about it, but we can use Hellmod with some, I think it's locked recipes, to figure it out. Let's see, or maybe disabled. There we go. Probably not the locked ones. So we'll do this to make the standard uranium fuel cell. And let's make it out of the 235, which comes from the centrifuge. And then we'll switch it to input and say we have... Well, let's make it exactly the input that we're going to have, which is going to be the results of that. Yeah, that's actually even less than I was thinking it would be. Only about 4. So not much at all. So we'll say 4. And we actually might need to separate this to make it look a little better. Because then we have our outputs. And we'll turn the 235 into fuel cells. We probably should do it on a new line back here. It's interesting, those numbers are so low they don't even show up on here. So we might need to do them manually. Let's do the 235s. Based on input, lock it together, and see if it looks correct. Not really. Looks like it's linking to the 238, and we don't want that. So we'll come in here and say 0 to lock it to the 235. So there we go, there's our input and our little bit of output of 238. What did it make a request for? Circuit boards. Well, that's actually a good thing to make a request for, because we had a ton of fiberglass boards. And it looks like it did finally get unloaded. So that's good to see. Just using up resources. Let's see if we can kind of calculate this a little bit, and the amount is too small to even see it, but we would get some 234 as well. So let's do a 234 fuel cell. Link it to input. Lock it together and probably hit this one to 0 again to get the actual number. And that looks about right. And these numbers are so small they don't even appear, which should tell you something to expect. But we go through all of this, and it's all a law of averages here, but we will process our 235 and our 234 using some of the 238, and we will have some left over for potentially that ammo. And let's see, does it require anything special? No, just the 238. So it looks like for a while here we'll have to just hold on to the 238 until we can do something with it. I don't think there's really much else we can actually do with it, which is kind of the problem. So of course it goes into various fuel cells and basically the ammo. And that's it. So that might be something you could have a huge pile of. Bury it in the back of the factory, I guess. But depleted uranium is actually not that dangerous. I mean, it's by definition less dangerous than normal uranium is. So I don't think the biters will care. Well, they'll probably care, but we'll pretend like the biters won't care. So what does all that mean in the end with these tiny numbers? Well, the only one that even shows up are these 235 cells, and we're making 0.05 of them per second. And since the fuel cell has a value of 2 gigajoules, we can kind of calculate what this would end up being. So 2 gigajoules would be 2,000 megajoules, or about 2,000 megawatts. So then we times that by 0.05. So all in all, we would get a paltry 100 megawatts. It's probably barely even worth setting up at this point. We should probably still make the fuel cells, but this is why it's a byproduct. So it actually, until this warehouse gets maxed out at 80,000, the factory will just continue like normal. But what about those advanced fuel cells? Well, if this number can even be believed, because it's probably rounding up. Well, it's going to be a lot less if it's a fifth of the previous one and the fuel cells have less fuel in them. That should give you an idea, so it adds like another 10 or 20. So all in all, that won't add much to our factory. So that's why I'm not going like hard on nuclear power now. It's nice that we have it, and it'll be researched. And we'll certainly want to use those fuel cells if we have a bunch. But the only time we're going to make any of it is going to be from processing the crucium crystals. At least until we have more research. And the research required to make uranium directly will be advanced ore refining. These machines require titanium. Now we will actually have the titanium finally. But it requires purple research, which we'll basically be able to do after we have all these ores processed. And that will require the purple research here, and these are the new items added by Science Cost Tweaker. You can just check all this to make sure nothing crazy is in there. Basically requires gold, white circuits, naphtha, so we'll actually have to mine oil. So nothing too crazy. It's basically the gold, and I kind of remember that what we're really waiting on is gold. So we'll be able to fairly quickly upgrade to this, but it won't be right now. And one thing I've done when I've done the numbers is like with cobalt here, these are the only two things that make cobalt. So one of them, the less desirable way, is set to 2000, which is from these givelite crystals. And the better way is from the ferrous dust, which is down here. Well, I've already written it down that if we were to process it directly, we would just add 2000 to that and make it 6000. And we would change what these did. So we'd basically copy this logic, push it down, and then have this line right here be the one that made the cobalt, and it would go straight in the warehouse. This one would be titanium, this one would be gold, this one would be for the uranium, and then these lines that we put here would basically just be offset. We'd pick them up and like put them right here, and probably have to move some of that, and then the resources would go up, go down, and then get sorted into the warehouses like they are with all this other stuff. So I tried to make it as easy to upgrade as possible. But we do have a uranium thing here, and I haven't set it yet. But because it's a byproduct, we actually don't want to have an on signal for this, because we're never going to want to turn it on as a byproduct. And the way you fix that is you just get rid of it. And don't calculate. We'll have to connect the wires and running dangerously low on red ones, but we still have an off signal, so if it ever gets above 80,000, it'll shut off. And because there's one less on condition, we can get rid of the on condition right there, because otherwise that light would just never light up anyway. So yeah, we'll have to watch it. As long as it stays below 80,000, we're fine, but if ever it gets to 80,000, that'll be a situation where we want to hook all this up. Because we might not want to build a centrifuge setup when we don't even really know how much we're going to want to actually make yet. I mean, we could guess that it would be 2 full belts, it would be 60 per second, which is a lot more than we have. Let's just guess here. If we set this to 60 instead for our upgraded setup, still makes a tiny amount of 234, but more. So we would connect that again, unhook it, set that to 0 to get a better idea. At least the numbers show up now. So we would get 0.63. So if we had 2000 megawatts times 0.63, so that's about 1.2 gigawatts out of that, and then a little bit more for the 234s. Which that is a big number. Not sure what our full capacity is if every single thing in the factory was running. Be quite a bit probably. Is it going to calculate? Oh, kinda. That one would be 600 for all of that. Pretty sure the factory has gone above a gigawatt before, and we have lots of solar panels we can do too, which those are all contributing. Will this tell us? Yeah. So it will certainly help, but it's not the end all. Not yet anyway. Oh my goodness, look at all this stuff we're making. More boards, more copper. Well, numbers are about to start going down. And that's good news. See, there they go. The whole process is starting. Because that means we can put all this to the test. And it looks like one of the things the signals got messed up because there's a green on the circuit HUD, which shouldn't be the case. And it looks like that green also exists with these poles, so it's probably... well, that's going to be hard to track down. I probably just accidentally hooked it up to the output somewhere. I might be able to narrow it down by just disconnecting a wire and seeing which side of the factory it stays on. Yeah, it's a good thing they're unhooked right now, because otherwise everything would be running. But, well, there's no green. And it's on that side, so something tells me that the mishook is somewhere around here. Oh, there we go. It wasn't necessarily a mishook, just the combinator pointed the wrong direction. And of course, it messes up all of the wires, but these need to be pointed towards the middle. And finally out of that wire. Boo. Don't know if we ever decided to actually make more of that wire. If I was wire, where would I be being made? Probably at the circuit bus. Maybe where we were making modules? Somewhere up here. So that's certainly where some wires are being made. But beyond that, I'm not sure. I don't think I ever actually started making it because it just wasn't very difficult to make. Let's put something in here to take care of that. The wire isn't something we ever really need, and the bots don't need it. Bots can create things with wires without actually using the wire, so they're pretty good in that sense. So let's just have 2 machines here, making each color. And I don't think they need to be speed modules or anything. Let's see what kind of input requirement this is. 4 per second, which I think would be a red. And this whole setup doesn't really make wire all that fast. But as you can see, our inventory gets filled very quickly with this wire, so it really doesn't take that long to make it. But anyway, we've got some wire now. I'm actually kind of surprised how long... let's not stand there. How long it's taking for the research to happen. I wonder if anything is falling behind. Or this is just how fast it goes. Yeah, it seems to be how fast it goes. Because we're making green and red at full speed, at least for the size of machines we built. And that's going in there, so... I mean, there's way more machines here that we can ever fill up for burst capacity, so... knowing that, we should probably start the research for the various ore processing types soon. It's like, alright, well there we go, that drone picked that up. I've been having problems with drones not picking up resources, but it picked up that one. But is it because it's not 0? No, the lights turned off at the wrong time. I believe it would be this one. So the question is this non-zero? Well, it's inside there, so we can't see. That's annoying. That's my guess, though. Because, yeah, you see that some of these, wow. Interesting. They see how they're non-zero, but they're almost 0? I wonder if they changed something with the update, because I did a post on the GitHub about this, and they said it was a problem with transport drones, but I wonder if they changed their mind because of the various mods that were broken, because if you had a fluid that was 0, and you start adding non-zero fluid temperatures, it's going to start increasing, and that's how you get very odd numbers like this, because normally you're used to it being, what, 15 degrees, I think? Yeah, 15 is the default temperature. Well, it still makes it 0. That makes it even more confusing. That the temperatures are non-zero, but it's still producing them at a temperature of 0. So how did they become non-zero? I do not know. Anyway, that's kind of the problem that I've been having with transport drones not working, is that the transport drones work just fine if you transport, say, water or steam, because it's a non-zero temperature. But since the recent update where Angel switched everything to be 0 degrees, it made it so basically nothing works. So where is this guy going? Okay, he went there. Not exactly sure why it picked it up, but it could be that the temperature inside here is non-zero, but that's kind of the problem I was having with all those empty drones. is that they were all running, but they were trying to pick stuff up but couldn't. See, that guy did not pick up anything, because that still must be... Well, it actually says it's empty, but it's not a display error. The thing has nothing in there. It's consuming fuel, and it's driving back and forth, but it has nothing in there. So that's kind of annoying. But it seems like it's partially working, so the worry I was having is I would have to completely replace all these drones, but you see that some of them are carrying their proper fluids, but other ones not, and they could be empty drones, so that makes it kind of hard to tell the difference. And solid drones don't care, they just pick up their item like normal because solids don't have temperatures applied to them, so it seems like some of them are working and some of them aren't. So I'm really hesitant to rebuild that stuff because obviously transport drones are a huge aspect of our factory with how far they go, and to completely replace them or develop an alternative would be a pain. Probably the best thing we can do is utilize all of these barrels and just use bots to do it, but bots are a lot worse at, like, bots are really bad when it comes to transporting fluids, so that's not really something you'd want to do. By the way, how are we doing on these residuals? 576,000. Still have a lot. So anyway, I guess it's partially running, but we kind of need to pay attention in case any of this stuff fills up, because then we're going to have to come in here and fix it, unfortunately. But I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, that by the time it becomes a problem, the mod will be updated and it won't matter. So I'm just not going to mess with it right now. So we're about ready to start flipping switches here. We just need to make sure we get this combinator set up right. Well, it's already running for some reason, which I don't think it should be. Why is it going? Oh, okay. So it's not actually running right now. This ore, besides being from the crystallizer, also, it comes a very long way. So if you follow it down, it comes here, goes there, and it also comes from back up here. I'm wondering if maybe we could do that a little better. Instead of going all the way down there, just cut the gap right here instead of doing that. So let's try to fix that too, but those are just byproducts from making science. So that's all that is. So we're not actually producing any ore right now, it's just getting distributed back to where it belongs. So this is the one that we were fixing. Let's see, the red looks accurate now. And the green needs to go across there. I believe that is correct. And there we go. Our green square is gone, and everything's kind of glitching, but that kind of makes sense because it's just being set by these combinators. So it's going to be a little weird. Alright, well, we could make a shortcut. And instead of sending this belt all over the place, we can just kind of come in here. And I guess just use this spot right here. Oops. Other direction, please. And there we go. Then we don't need this one anymore. Let's trash our inventory. Yeah, it kind of sucks with those drone problems, because for the most part they seem to work pretty well, and now that they don't, it's really annoying because it's such a good mod otherwise. It's always hard to tell, like, do mods get fixed quickly or do they take forever? It kind of all depends on the person who made the mod. I mean, if I knew anything about how it worked, I would attempt to fix it myself, but I honestly have no idea. I could do, like, tiny little configuration changes and, like, move a recipe around or something like that. That's basically all I really know how to do. So you can see this belt went forever down here. Bots are desperately trying to help. They're just going to take those ores, and hopefully... Where are they going? Yep. Back to that warehouse to put it where it belongs anyway. So we keep following this. Man, it really zigzagged, and then finally up here where it meets the crystallizer. Let's drive the crawler up, because we also had that big warehouse of Givelite, I think, that we needed to move. Since we're about to start consuming a bunch of resources, we might as well get that taken care of as well. Let's turn off the logistics for a bit. Wow, it's amazing how close the road is up there with how far we've expanded. back when the base was first expanded, all this stuff looked like it was super far away, and that is no longer the case. It's all starting to get rather close. Okay, we had a bunch of this. Basically, a full warehouse. Okay, we've got some. Is one of these full? How come it didn't completely... Oh, I see, they're limited. Well, for now, we probably want to unlimit them. But, it might be hard to remember that I did that. So I'm kind of worried about that. So, in that case... let's grab a warehouse right here. And fill that one up. And just let it transfer resources in there until it gets full. And these ones will run when this one is done. As long as it doesn't run out, I'm kind of fine with just testing things and seeing how it works. And that's the end of this episode. The next one is going to be the big day, where we flip all the switches and see how all this tier 3 ore sorting actually works. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.